Irene Cookston.
And your married name?
Brown. I was born October the 25th in 1927. When I was growing up, why they called me sis or sister.
Yeah.
Never called me by my name.
Do they still call you that today? They still do, don't they?
Well, Bill did, and he's gone.
Yeah.
Tom did. He's still alive. Because I know I was called sister, and I came home one day and I was so upset because I told my mom that I had a name, and when I was at school, I liked to use my name, and so she got to where they would refer part of the time. If they only did it at home, I didn't care.
Right.
Well, I mean, I didn't feel like I had a name. I was the fourth child.
Okay.
Mama had Fred and Cress, and they both died shortly after they were born. And then she got Leo, and he was always special because she got to keep him. And it seemed like she got a beautiful child. I mean, his features, he was a handsome little boy, dark curly hair. And then 18 months later, I came along, and I was a little girl, and I had black hair too.
Oh.
But mine was straight.
Uh-huh.
And right after I was born, Leo got really, really sick. And my dad got on his horse and went out because they knew when the train came by, it came by not too far away from where we lived, and Dad rode out to the railroad and flagged that train down and left the horse standing there and went in and got the doctor. And they caught the train back out, and Dad got on the horse, and the horse stayed right there and waited for him.
Wow.
And
And then brought him back for your brother.
But I mean, can you imagine living in a time when you could go out, flag down a train, they'd stop, you get on and...
Yep, that definitely wouldn't happen today, I'll tell you.
No. And then right after me, about 18 months later, along came Tom, and Arlene came along in 1930. Well, when she was born, I wasn't 3 yet, because she was born the first day of October. Max came along.
Max,
my brother Max. Maxie, and he was what they called a blue baby.
Oh.
And he lived exactly 4 months. And Mama she always slept with him up across her chest at night. And then came Bill.
Then came Bill.
See, there's 3 years between Bill and Arlene, and 3 years between him and Faith. Bill was sort of in there by himself. Faith was born, and after we went to, we left Wyoming and went to Montana. About 9 months later, why Faith came along. Somehow, Dad felt guilty about, because Mom didn't want to have any more kids, not that quick anyway. So he made arrangements for her to go to the hospital. Josie came over and took care of us while Mom was gone. Faith was born in 1936. Keith, she was born in May, and Keith was born in June of 37. And
this was still in
Scotty
Wyoming?
was born in September of 38. We all, at night, we came home, we all had our chores to do. We get the dishes and stuff done at night, and then everybody sat around the kitchen table. She sat at one end, darning socks or knitting. Everybody did their homework. And you didn't get to get up from there and go to bed till you got it done.
And where did the homework come from?
School.
From school. So did you go to school during the day?
Oh yeah, every day we got, there was a, one neighbor had it was kind of like a van, and he had seats that went down the side of it, just hard board, I guess.
Uh-huh.
He picked up the kids way back up, and then he came down and we had to go down to the road and he'd pick us up. And Mom used to watch when it was cold, because she could stand on a chair and look out a window and you could see him coming. And then we'd get and run down, because he was terrible. He'd just yell at us kids if we weren't right there at the road.
If you weren't
And
waiting.
so a lot of times we got down there and had to wait.
Right.
And I actually got my feet frostbitten.
Oh my goodness.
Had chilblains in my feet.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
That was probably.
Oh yeah. And then
painful.
see, they itch. Oh.
It's
For
blood.
all winter, yeah. See, they get purple across the ball of my foot and my heels.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Reading and English. I loved words. And any extra time I had, we had a big dictionary, and it was, I'm not kidding you, it was this thick. And you go through there, it had pictures and word definitions, and I always wanted to know the definition, because you know, so many of our words have got so many different ones.
Right.
And I'd just go read the dictionary. And then we had a library, because I always had my homework done. And early on, why the teacher discovered that I could do the little kids' flashcards and stuff. So that's what I did. I became a teacher's helper long before they ever had them. And I would do the flashcards and help them with their reading and whatever they needed. And I did it all through school with the different levels. But I worked a lot with the little kids.
That's great.
And then we had a little library, and I read. One year I won a state award. I read 40 books and made 40 book reports.
That's amazing.
Oh, every chance I got, I'd sit down and read. Because my mom told me, you can go anywhere you want to go in a book. And I found out that was the only way I could get my own time. I could read it and go someplace else. Troy was the closest town to us, and it was they had logging, and it was a railroad town, and it was a really wild town, and Mom and Dad really didn't want Leo and I to go down there to go to high school. They didn't have any transportation for us to get down there, and so Montana made a deal with Idaho. We could go into Bonner's Ferry to go to high school, find a family that we could board with, and the state paid them for us to go to high school in Idaho. I worked out on a farm there. That first year, Leo did too. Oh, I was over at a neighbor's house, it's Mrs. Schwartz, and him and his mom and dad were over there, and they were talking to her because she was wanting to come over there and run her place because her son had gotten drafted. George was there, and I left and I was walking home, and he come driving by, and he stopped and asked me if I'd go to the movies with him next night, I think.
Yeah.
And I said sure, and he came and picked me up. We went to the movies, but we went ice skating and stuff on the river.
Yeah.
That's something that, Papa was beautiful on the ice. He could dance, he could jump, he could do all of that stuff. And I got him into a roller rink one time. He was going to go roller skating with me.
Uh-huh.
That was the funniest thing. Rented him a pair, and he got him on, got him over, he got a hold of this pole, and because he just, his feet were going, because he was used to the ice, and it's different. And he got a hold of this pole, and I couldn't pry him off of it. It was so funny. Because, he was very graceful, he really was.
On the ice.
So we didn't get to roller skate much. I was 15 when I met him, and I didn't marry him until I was 18.
Till you were 18? And when you were 18 and you guys, where did you get married?
Libby, Montana. We eloped.
You eloped?
Yep.
And Papa, was he in the Army
Well, see,
already?
because at that time you had to wait for 3 days in Idaho.
He was back from the service, so
Yeah, and he only had 90 days. We could go over to Montana and get married. And in Idaho, we had that waiting period.
Right.
And you had to go to Coeur d'Alene. Didn't want to go down there. And so we just got on a bus, Betty and Tom and George and I, and we went to Libby. And we found us a Methodist minister, and we got married in a Methodist
church?
Yep, just us.
So you're 18, and Papa is how old?
20.
20. And so you're 18 and he's 20, and he only had 90 days.
He would have been 21. This was January, and he would have been 21 in February.
So what was the date you got married?
January 13th, 1946, on Sunday. That's why I think I enjoyed the time in Germany, because in all the years that George and I were married, basically that was the only time that we got to be by ourselves and we didn't have somebody else living with us. March the 11th, 1948. I had heard it on the radio. It's something that I listened to, and every time I heard it, I loved the name. And then when she came along, it was just hope. See, and I wanted to name her Georgia, and Papa wouldn't let me.
Oh.
And so her middle name is just G.
Oh.
But it's, you know, I'm in for it. And then later, and he didn't seem to have any reason. I don't think he knew why, but he did not want me to call for that. Well, come to find out why, that was one of his mother's sister's names. But when I got home with my own, I was scared to death of her. And Mom showed me that one morning, how to hold her and to wash her hair, and because that was one thing in our family, the baby was taken care of first before anything else in the house moved. Everybody
nice.
To help take care of Hope. Somebody always had her. When she was born, then he was sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I went when she was 6 weeks old. Somewhere in there, why they lost her little bag that had the diapers in it.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, they did.
Oh goodness.
And I got into Raleigh. I didn't have any diapers. I didn't have any money, and I had enough. And the only thing I could figure to do, because they didn't have any place you could buy any either.
Oh, yeah.
But they had. You remember they used to have those things you get Kotex.
Yes.
So I went and got a Kotex.
Well, that did the trick, didn't it?
And put it inside of what she had.
So
We managed.
so
Hope slept in a dresser drawer, and her mattress was an army blanket rolled up and put in the bottom of there and then we got her Grandma Brown sent us a buggy. She bought us a buggy and
nice.
sent it. Oh yeah, see, because that way I could put her down in there, and it was warm down in there, was you could fold the thing down flat. And if it was nasty at all or too sunny, why you just pull that top up over, and it was her bed, and it was her take her someplace, because you know it was a while before strollers came along. And then if there was snow, she'd flop down out in the field, and she used to make the most beautiful angels in the snow. She'd get up real careful so that she didn't mess them up. October the 15th, 1949. I'd heard it and liked, and Papa did too, and he's the one that insisted that it be spelled with one R.
Oh.
And I said, why? And he said, because of our last name. He said, it's a common name, and if you take one R out, it makes his name. It's still Forrest.
Right.
But it separates him from a lot of other people. I've always felt so fortunate, both of them. My kids got married in my house. Because I remember Forrest said, well, Mom, I knew you'd do anything to get us up, to keep us. He said, but you didn't have to blow up the mountain. When Forrest asked me not to get him a deferred and only son
exemption from the draft?
For the military, because he was a sole son.
Right.
And when he asked me and that, and I always knew that if anything happened, that I probably would have, I don't know what I would have done, I really don't. But that's the hardest thing I ever did. God, I've had so many. Probably when I saw my son graduate and get his wings, get his commission and his wings.
That was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah.
I remember we have a picture of that.
Yeah.
Where did you go to see that?
Was that in Dothan, Alabama?
I think it was.
Yeah, it was in Dothan.
Yeah.
George broke his leg. Vicky would come out there and walk with him, and she'd walk along and hold his hand, and he would just sweat. It hurt so bad. And he would go, and boy, you couldn't pry her away from him. Oh, she took good care of him. When he re-roofed the house, our house, she never missed a beat. She was over there on that roof with him every single day. That was my Betty, Betty Stage. No, Betty had one of the hardest lives of anybody I know. She's had cancer at least 5 times. Betty was taking care of him. I think we were in Hawaii, and they were down at Westport, and they were down toward the dock. Lad would get Gil up. He found out he'd get him up anytime, and Gil got to looking, and that dog was getting him up in the middle of the night. So he put a stop to that, but he'd be out at the crack of dawn. And Gil said this woman kept watching him one morning. She said to him, because see, we'd take just a plain bag,
yeah,
and you just pick it up in your hand and then pull your bag down and tie it. And Gil had done that, and that woman asked him, "What have you got in that sack?" And he said, I picked it up after the dog. He said, you know, it keeps your hands warm on a cold morning. And he said, Gil had a funny sense of humor. Crystal is one of the smartest people on 2 feet. George really bonded with her because she had the need to have somebody like that just would really listen and understand, and he always did. Melissa and Sandy were the first 2. Well, now in 1970, you and Lance and Tracy. Tracy and you were exactly to the day 1 month difference in your ages. And then Lance's is not that far off from hers because his was in June. Terry was on the end of the year, see, and then there was the 4 of you in 70. And then in 73, Justin was in December. In 74, the following in April, in 74 was Jeremy. See, and Jeremy's all 4s, the 4th month of the 4th day of 74. And see, when he poured the deck up there, he did the same thing he did down below. And you remember those pillars underneath that deck up there were so pretty.
They're
just
still
as
there
smooth
today.
as glass.
Yeah.
Well, it would take some doing. And he, because there again, he made his forms, and those were poured one at a time. Mainly Pete,
Yeah.
Terry's dad.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete was there all the time. Oh yeah.
Him and Papa were buddies.
Yeah. The day that they landed on the moon, we were all down there.
Oh.
Yeah. And I remember him standing there and like Scotty and looking up and saying, it was just mind-boggling to us. Pete and Judy, very often, they put their sleeping bags and stuff out there in the boathouse because we'd have so many people, they'd be all over the deck and everywhere else. Little Bill always wanted to ride in one of those buckets, and they always told him, no, it's not safe. And one day they were up there and something happened and something came loose and that thing went down and it was full and it shot way out in the lake. And George said to Bill, he said, do you know why you can't ride the bucket? None of them ever asked again. Well, Uncle Bill used to come up there and he would get up real early in the morning and go down and fish. And Lance would get out of bed and down there he'd go and it'd be cold. And Lance would sit between his legs and Bill would put his coat around him. And him and Lance, oh yeah, and Lance never missed going down there with him. He's the only one that was willing to get out of bed at the crack of dawn and go down there fishing. But he loved to fish. And Papa took him fishing all different places. And I remember when you kids went down to the lake and you got all those salamanders, and Papa had those little pools up behind, and you brought those darn things up there and put them in them pools. And then we found out that there's no way those little guys, we found them where they tried to go back. We found them clear down in front of the house and the road dead. And that was the end of that. That's what happened to Jeremy when he had we had that emergency.
Right.
Was he, and they said that was a, they figured was a hornet. And it had stung him because when he came running in the house, he had 3 great big welts that were about that far apart. And he was laying face down. And all of a sudden, he starts with one foot scratching the bottom of his foot, and the other one, he's got his hands up, but he's scratching the palms of his hands.
Right.
And I asked him, what's the matter? Well, I'd seen George have hive attacks, and I knew immediately. And so I just stuck you kids in the front of the truck with me, and I had you hold him. And I told you, I don't know what I thought I was going to do. If he stops breathing, you tell me.
Right.
We got in there, and remember we went into St. Peter's in Olympia, and that's one time we came running in the door. And normally they mess around with you for a half hour, and they said to me, we have an emergency, and I said, yes, we do. He's been stung. And remember, we went straight back.
I remember.
And I remember that too, boy, because that's when the doctor come running in, and he had the needle in his hand, and Justin saw him, and Justin dove and grabbed him right below the knees, almost took him to the floor.
Oh.
And Justin started screaming at him, no, he don't want a shot.
Oh.
And the doctor said, son, he has to have a shot or he's gonna die. And Justin said, he'd rather die than have that shot. And the doctor just said to the two nurses, get him out of here. And he got him out, and then they made you go and told you keep him out.
Yeah.
You were furious.
I was.
Because you didn't get to see. And then just as soon as they gave Jeremy the shot, why, he began to feel better.
Is there anything you'd like to say that you remember about Chuck that you enjoyed the most? I loved his...
Yeah, when he took a day off from school and come down, came walking up there at the lake, and he had this bag in his hand, and I said, what in the world are you doing out of school today? And he said, well, I took a business day. And I said, oh. And he said, I got this bag of bubble gum. He said, I come down here, I want you to teach me how to blow bubbles. Because he couldn't figure out how to blow bubbles. And so him and I sat there and chewed bubble gum. And because I can blow them as big as your face. And I used to blow them with kids. If you take them off careful, you don't get them all over you.
Right.
But usually kids don't take them off right, and they wind up a mess. You get them all over your clothes and everything else.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I didn't think he was ever going to learn, but he finally did. Oh, I tell you, he was so proud of himself. He never did get one much bigger than that, but he could go home and blow bubbles with. Because see, I taught his kids to blow bubbles.
With bubble gum.
Yeah.
That's so
No,
funny.
that was one of the funniest things. And him and Lance put up posters up at the lake, and there was one of them, and that, to this day, Lance will just double up laughing. Last we knew why it was still there, but it was kind of a plasticized, great big one of Ferraro and whoever was running that year. And they started out putting it on a tree down close to the highway where you go into the lake. It wasn't very far up.
Yeah.
It's a great big tree. And every time they did, why, this woman, we knew who it was. And she would come down and she would take that down. And so Lance and George would go down and they'd move it up. And she kept managing to get up that high. So finally what they did was they went down there and they put a ladder in the truck, and Lance and George took that and put it way up there in that tree, and as high as George could reach, wrapped it around and fastened it. And here, it wasn't that many years ago, you could look up there in that tree and growing up branches and stuff, but that poor old tattered thing was still hanging up there. She never managed to get that one down, but that was kind of a game, and we laughed about it. You started there as real little, because you guys were living with us there for a while.
Oh.
And it used to be we'd get
In
ready
Simpson?
to leave and to go up there, and gosh, you were just walking. and you were bound determined you were going with us, and you'd cry and scream, and Pop would pick you up and away we'd go. And your mom used to get so mad. You don't have to take her just because she, but, and so it was like it had been with Vicki. I mean, whenever we went, why, you just went up there. Yeah, you had a temper like your mother. And I don't remember what happened, but you grabbed up a hunk of, it was chocolate cake, and it had real thick chocolate icing. And you grabbed that cake up and you threw it at Pop and hit him right between the eyes. And I tell you, it's priceless. Too bad we didn't have cell phones then. And it just sort of peeled off and dropped down on the table, with the expression on his face and your face, and not a sound in that room. And he just looked down at you and pointed down the hall. You jumped down out of that chair and back through the bathroom and into the bedroom you went. The minute you hit the bedroom, you just started, I mean, howling like a banshee.
I felt terrible.
And you went, and then all of a sudden, and me, I'm sitting out there convulsed with laughter. Papa said to me, "Thanks a lot, you're a lot of help." And I couldn't stop because it was so funny. Well, the only pine cone fight I remember with them boys is when we were over in Idaho on Lake Ponderay. And I remember this little white-haired girl coming home and saying that they were calling people awful names. And Papa went out and went down there, and he stood back and watched them for a while. And they would wait till somebody would come out of the bathroom, guys, and they would have their little spiel of what they were going to do and throw the cones, and Papa let them do a little bit, and then he walked up and he told them to get to the trailer. And remember, they come running in. They fell in. They were running so fast.
They did.
And they came in there and they said that Papa was mad and they didn't know why. And he told him to get up there and get in that trailer, and they weren't going to get out of it until they got to Washington State. I mean, their eyes were about this big. And they figured he was really going to let them have it. He didn't. And of course, I had a big laugh over that one too.
Papa and the boys all went to the bathroom, and Papa came back and told you a story about a song that was being sung in the bathroom.
Oh yeah, everybody come out of that bathroom, but we had a lot of that bathroom experiences because they go in the boys' bathroom, and of course one of us always, because never would let them go by themselves, but you'd stand outside. People started coming out there laughing, and you think, oh my God, what are they doing this time? Those two, they entertained themselves.
So what were they doing when they were in there?
Well, usually singing songs.
Yeah, like...
Oh yeah, they didn't do anything naughty, they just...
Do you have an example?
Well, yeah, that one, it came from the old Alka-Seltzer ad. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. What a relief it is. No, people people in all the parks. I imagine some of those people remember us to this day. And I
Brandy
always
is a
think of
very
that
sweet-
when I see a jar of peanut butter. I always think about Brandy. And I made, like at Christmas time, little velvet dresses, like for Terry and Sandy and all, whichever little one that we had. Another person that probably did more for me than anybody else was George's mother.
And what did she do?
She just was always there for me from day one. I mean, and she used to, she always had the fear that George might do something, and if she'd find out that him and I'd have some kind of a row, and boy, I tell you, she'd come down on him, and he was number one in her life. But boy, when it came to us two, and she'd crawl all over him, you know, because she was a little short woman. But boy, I tell you, when it come to me,
She's very protective of
oh,
you.
you bet she was. And Stacy really didn't know how to drive that well in traffic. I didn't think I was going to live through that one. God, oh.
I was very good at testing you.
Boy, I was tested to the limit. I mean, oh.
Oh, goodness.
That's why I got gray hair. Wow.
Mm-hmm.